My name is David McFarlane. I'm a Canadian visual artist, musician, and researcher. I'm currently in second year of a PhD program, a newly founded program called Media and Design Innovation at Toronto Metropolitan University. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my research thus far. There we go. The Great Lakes hold 21%, or more than 1/5 of the world's fresh water. 43 million humans depend on the lakes for drinking water. Despite this, human-generated water contamination, commodification, and scarcity all combine to present increased threats to the survival of human and non-human species. Water extraction, access, governance, and sovereignty represent points of contention between Indigenous First Nations and the settler governments of the United States and Canada. There we go. For some time now, I've imagined a dialogue with and between the 5 Great Lakes. What would they tell us about the exploitation and colonization they have witnessed and experienced? And what deeper understanding and empathy might we gain? I'd first considered this idea as the premise for a kind of a grand narrative fiction, a novel perhaps, whereby the characters would be modeled after histories and traits of each of the lakes, each character knowing that they would inevitably be coming together in confluence with the other 4. It's not a stretch to perceive something like a mood emanating from a body of water. Attempts at personifying the natural world are not new. Western poets' use of pathetic fallacy is commonplace. But this Western tradition of describing, representing, and being separate from falls short of my objectives of developing communication and collaboration between human and non-human actors and creating more sustainable relationships with the natural world. I've come to shift my initial curiosity from creating a representation of the lakes to one of co-creating experiences with them through musical collaboration. I'm a white settler of European ancestry with educational background in Western music and arts. I'm interested in building different relationships with nature, and I believe a necessary step is the development and use of decolonizing methodologies. I situate my art practice and research creation project on land in Canada within the Dish with One Spoon territory. As a newcomer to this territory, I've been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect, and within the context of human-induced climate change. The Dish with One Spoon wampum, the belt shown here, is in fact a legal document that discusses the shared responsibility to take care of the land, including the waters and their ecosystems. I see care for water as a reciprocal responsibility I can take on through my research practice and my art practice. In Making Love with the Land, Canadian First Nations artist Joshua Whitehead discusses the sentience of land and water. He says, "The land is an archive, is a library, is a genealogy. A body of land is a body of literature. Water remembers, it maintains memories. It recalls the substances it has previously dissolved. Trees remember, and in their wounds is a witnessing of wars past, diseases eradicated. If the land can witness it too, it can listen. And it talks through what we might call living stories." In order to hear these stories myself and prepare for my own conversations with the lakes, I'm researching technological, creative, and ethical frameworks for engaging with these non-human actors. There's been a marked evolution in Western art making from objective representation to today's embodied notions. This shift was very much at the core of the modern visual arts movements of the 20th century. Representation gave way to strategies of abstraction, as in Cubism, and the whole realm of other isms that followed, many conceived here in Paris. These movements moved away from the figure being the focal point, collapsing it into the background and eventually abstraction. In the example here, we can see Mondrian's shifting perception over the course of 13 years. Mondrian starts with representing, moves through exploring his own perception, and moving towards what he described as pure representation of the human mind through a style he called neoplasticism. Multiple shifts were taking place to try to awaken in the public a dialogue about life and the paint stroke as a means to express instead of represent our worlds. But their approach was rooted in colonialist humanist culture. These concepts remained fixed in the representation of a subject, neither embodied nor alive. In contrast, Anishinaabe artist Rebecca Belmore's 2017 site-specific series of installations called Wave Sound is a powerful example of how work can invite embodied experiences. This installation of wave sound is a large cone cast from the rock surfaces on the north shore of Lake Superior. The cone faces out to the vast lake and quietly invites the viewer to listen to the land by lying down on the rock, such that one can place an ear over the small opening at the small end of the cone in hopes of hearing something beautiful. The listener enters into a sympoetic relationship with the situation the piece creates, physically as well as intellectually. Through the work, we are invited to experience and be with the land, and the artwork is a means and not an end. French philosopher Michel Serres' story, Noise, articulates concepts both in visual art and in sound that specifically identifies an interesting challenge of describing that threshold between perceiving and being. Serres states, "White noise never stops. It is limitless, continuous, perpetual, unchanging. It has no grounding, itself no opposite. How much noise has to be made still to still the noise? And what fury orders fury? Noise is not a phenomenon. All phenomena separate from it. Figures on a ground, as a light in a fog, as any message, cry, call, signal, must each separate from the hubbub that fills the silence, just to be perceived, sensed, known, and exchanged. As soon as there is phenomenon, it leaves noise. As soon as an appearance arises, it does so by masking the noise. Thus it is not phenomenology, but being itself." End quote. As Serres gradually evolves this symbiotic figure-ground relationship in the story, he also overlays these ideas onto the evolution of modern art through referencing the three painters in Balzac's unknown masterpiece, a story that was highly influential to post-impressionist artists, namely Cézanne. The Balzac piece recounts an era where the categories of beauty, verisimilitude, and mimesis were disappearing, where questions about the relationship between artwork and thought were coming to the fore, becoming more and more central in the relation to the technical limits of painting. Serres' story invites me to ask, what is noise, what is music, what is sound, and what is silence? And how does our situatedness inform our perception of this? These questions have pervaded contemporary music composition and inspired composers to employ processes with which to move away from mimesis or mimicry and the imitation of the real world in the arts. While Serres kept to the world of ideas, moving away from representation also gained popularity in music. The determination of figure and ground, noise and sound have major implications in several fields of contemporary musical practice. When noise becomes sound and sound becomes musicalized as a note, is a focus of rich investigation in avant-garde and electronic music. Brian Eno's Ambient One, Music for Airports, is a music designed to blend with an existing soundscape and blur the boundary of where his participation as the composer begins and ends. Though Eno was not the first to make what we now identify as ambient music, he was the first to name it. 110 years before Eno's time, Eric Satie completed Gymnopédie No. 1 in 1988. Furniture music was the way Satie described the role of the music in the context of its environment, part of, inclusive of, the sounds in it, not the main focus. Mechanical processes and technologies have also played a significant role in altering how we perceive sound. In 1948, Pierre Schaeffer had coined the term musique concrète and had begun experimenting with tape loops and musical systems. The early tape phasing experiments of Steve Reich certainly present a process for coaxing musical ideas from noise, figure from ground as well. The strategy of taking hypothetical, technical, and theoretical positions to arrive at novel and surprising results, beginning with Satie, has become well established in avant-garde and electronic music. Many early electronic instruments were designed to diminish the need to play an instrument or have knowledge of musical theory. With the theremin, here pictured. In particular, the body became centered as the primary interactor with the instrument. The theremin relies on the body in space and its relationship to the instrument's two antennae. The theremin player interacts less intellectually and more in a physical way as the direct playing method. The music comes from a unique symbiosis between the performer and the instrument. The player is freed from Western codification embedded in other musical interfaces. Their relationship alters the quality of the air in their environment. The body's capacitance alters the instrument's magnetic fields and are translated into sound. Virtual violinist Clara Rockmore, pictured here, adopted the theremin as her main instrument and highlighted the physicality of her playing technique by remarking, "You can't play air with hammers, you have to play with butterfly wings." Contemporary artist Mylise has pushed the boundaries of her practice into the realm of ethics as they pertain to collaborating with non-human beings. Mylise is self-described sonic artist, immersive ecology designer, and biophilic energy ambassador. Central to her work, she cites, is the merging of art and technology into agnostic mediums that instigate and enliven our human connection with the hidden living dimensions of nature. Her recent work explores using nature's methods of information and resource distribution, such as the symbiotic relationships between mycelium and plants, as a means of training AI such that a bias towards living in harmony with nature is fostered. To this end, she uses sensors, biodata sonification, and generative coding strategies. Interest in acoustic ecology began as a form of acoustic activism on the part of like-minded Canadian faculty at Simon Fraser University in the late 1960s and early 70s. Of practicing acoustic ecology, R. Murray Schafer states that ecology is the study of the relationship between living organisms and their environment. Acoustic ecology is therefore the study of sounds in relationship to life and society. This cannot be accomplished by remaining in the laboratory. It can only be accomplished by considering on location the effects of the acoustic environment on the creatures living in it. End quote. Born out of this form of acoustic activism was a genre of composing called soundscape composition. Central to this genre is the concept of conscious listening. Hildegard Westerkamp, one of the group's founding composers, researchers, explains, to compose with the environment, with environmental sound implies a relationship, a dialogue between soundscape and listener in daily life, no matter what the composer's intent may have been from the start. The materials inevitably speak with their own language, whose deeper meanings may only emerge with repeated listening and sound production. And that in itself has the power to shift the composer's intent, end quote. This practice, I believe, is a viable way to be with rather than represent, and is one I am exploring. The technical aspects of my methodology are influenced and in line with the questioning and the practices I've discussed thus far. Data is a sea of noise, and humans have oceans of it. How can we make sense of it? How can we feel its significance? What kinships can be made with the tools and technology to better understand this data? This past year, I've been experimenting with a biodata sonification device pictured above, designed and built by Sam Cusimano. The device reads micro changes in conductivity within organic matter in real time. The device reads those changes in values and expresses the fluctuations as MIDI notes, and has the ability to assign various types of scales, such as the 12-tone chromatic scale, pentatonic, and minor scales. While visiting the sites around the lake as I conduct field work, I intend to use this device to make recordings of the data I encounter. My article does not present a comprehensive or complete methodology at this point, but rather first steps towards one, and there are other experiments I'm considering. I intend to experiment with combining the sonified biodata with field recordings from sites I visit. I may also later combine other instrumentation to the recordings. I'm also exploring the development of a graphic notation generator as a way to provide scores for others to interpret the sounds. As I am moving away from mimesis towards mythexis and participating in what the lakes are doing, I'm working towards a methodology that focuses on visiting with, harmonizing with, listening with, and co-creating with during my fieldwork. A key area of focus to explore for me to explore is an ethical methodology, which asks, how am I impacting those I am being with? How might I gain consent from the non-human actors? I will also be further evaluating my situatedness, particularly in consideration of Dylan Robinson's concerns as to how your positionality guides the way you listen to musical subjectivity. I will be researching the many treaties and covenants that describe agreements I may need to be aware of as I visit these sites. Lastly, I am exploring how I might incorporate ceremony into my activities on the land and water. Thank you very much. That's all I have today. Thank you for ICEA for inviting me, and I'd love to have a discussion with you if you'd like to have questions maybe after. Thank you.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.